Hello everyone and welcome back to Woo Can Cook. My name is Wesley and this is a show where we are slowly making our way through all of the food from my childhood. Today we're touching on a big comfort food for me growing up, which is the Hawaiian Loco Moco from L&L Drive-In. For those who are not familiar, a Loco Moco is a Hawaiian diner classic that you'll see come up with many different kinds of add-ons to the classic recipe, including things like deep fried onions, mushroom gravies, kimchi, chives, spam, which is my personal favorite, and all kinds of other enhancements. Personally for me though, the L&L Drive-In version captures the classic elements of this dish at its core, which is a hamburger patty with an over easy egg on top, covered in gravy with a side of rice and macaroni salad, and yes, the mac salad is absolutely key. As always, I also took a shot at my own version of the Loco Moco with a few interesting Pan-Asian twists as well, including the use of miso paste, Shaoxing wine, and a brief failed experiment with Beyond Meat for a vegetarian attempt, which we'll get to shortly. But first, the classic. So we're starting off by building out the wet elements, which will become our gravy. I'm starting with a quarter cup of beef broth as our base element, followed by 2 tablespoons of Worcester sauce for some brightness, 4 tablespoons of soy sauce for some umami, and 2 tablespoons of cornstarch to help thicken the whole thing up. Then we're mixing this all together until the cornstarch has no lumps remaining and setting it aside. Moving on to our patty, I'm sticking with the classic 80-20 beef chuck, which will have all of the fat content that you need not only to make a nice juicy patty, but also to render some beef fat for our gravy. We're seasoning this with some kosher salt and freshly ground pepper, then forming into a patty with a divot in the center to account for the patty's puffing up once it starts cooking. Remember that the patty is also going to shrink a bit once it hits the pan, so learn from my mistake and make yours a little bit flatter and a little bit wider than mine here. Over on the stove, I have a cast iron skillet heating on high heat, then I'm adding just 2 tablespoons of vegetable oil to get things started. Go easy on the oil here, because remember that you're using 80-20 chuck, which is going to render quite a bit of fat on its own as well. We're cooking our patty to our preferred doneness, I'm going medium rare here, and then reserving our rendered fat for our gravy. Then I'm turning my heat to low, adding a tablespoon of butter to the pan until melted, followed finally by my gravy mixture. Then we're letting the whole thing cook down until it's thickened in texture and setting this aside as well. Next, for this version, I'm going for an over easy egg with a pinch of kosher salt, which means I'm using medium-low heat, then flipping the egg very briefly right before it finishes cooking for a nice runny yolk. Then we're plating all of this with a side of white rice and macaroni salad and topping it all with our gravy. The L&L version that I remember also uses an ice cream scooper for their mac salad and rice, so we're staying true to our form here and making nice round balls for our sides. I know there's going to be a lot of skeptics here, but this is honestly one of my top 10 favorite things to eat of all time. It's just a super nostalgic dish, especially with some Hawaiian sun guava juice on the side, and takes me right back to when I was 10 years old, eating takeout from L&L on the beach in Hawaii while picking out little bits of sand that somehow is flying into your food. Okay, so moving on, if you were watching the live stream while I was making this, then you witnessed the incredible crash and burn failure that was my attempt at a vegetarian Beyond Meat version of a Loco Moco. As it turns out, if you add too many wet elements to Beyond Meat, then it loses all of its structural integrity and completely falls apart. So I went ahead and dumped this strange cat food stuff into the trash and went back to my 80-20 chuck for my third and final attempt. This time though, I'm seasoning with a bit of oyster sauce and soy sauce in addition to our kosher salt and pepper. This is going to serve two purposes. The first is that it will give our patty a fun depth of flavor, but also the sugar elements that we're adding will help create a nice Maillard reaction with our patty's sear for a super crisp and browned patty. Moving on to our gravy, we're starting again with a base of beef stock and soy sauce, but then adding 2 tablespoons of Shaoxing wine and 2 tablespoons of rice vinegar for a bit of brightness. Then we're adding 2 tablespoons of miso paste for a fun fermented depth of flavor and umami. Then we're mixing this all together until the miso paste has dissolved. Then in a separate bowl, we're mixing equal parts cornstarch and water for a cornstarch slurry. Over on the stove, I have my cast iron ripping hot again. Then I'm adding 2 tablespoons of vegetable oil and getting my patty going. You'll notice upon flipping that the sweet elements that we incorporated has caused a wonderful crisping with our patty for a bit of extra flavor. Then we're reserving the fond in our pan, reducing our heat to low, and melting a tablespoon of butter followed by our gravy mixture and cornstarch slurry. Then we're stirring to combine, letting the whole thing reduce until it's nice and thick and setting it aside. For our egg this time, I'm going for a super lacy sunny side up egg, which means I'm using a bit more vegetable oil, about 4 tablespoons worth, and turning my fire up to high heat. Pretend that didn't happen, and remember that that's bound to happen when you keep cracking eggs one-handed, Wesley. Then I'm spooning my hot oil over the whites of my egg to create a wonderful, lacy, crispy fried egg. Then we're adding this to our patty over a bed of white rice, topping with our umami-packed gravy, and finally finishing with a bit of furikake or dried seaweed. This was a super fun one to experiment with, and obviously it tasted amazing because it's a hamburger patty covered in gravy with a fried egg on top. On top of that though, the fun fermented elements that we incorporated like miso paste, oyster sauce, and Shaoxing wine also helped create a fun depth of flavor that just takes the dish to another level. If I'm being truly honest though, after eating 2 of these things in one night, these things are just so high in cholesterol that it absolutely blows my mind, seriously. Okay, so that's it everyone. I hope you enjoyed this and I hope you had fun exploring Hawaiian comfort food with me. We also touched on some fun uses of Spam in Hawaiian food a few weeks back with some Spam and pineapple fried rice. If you didn't catch that, I highly recommend you watch that one over there. Hopefully this was informative and helpful, or at the very least entertaining to watch. As always, like, comment, subscribe, push all the buttons, and I'll see you soon.